Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today with us, we're really lucky to have Ash Miller, who's CEO and founder of Access Fertility. And he's going to share a bit of insight into the role of IVF refund programs, why more people are turning to this, and the impact this is having on people's lives, particularly during a cost of living crisis. And I think it's just a really important conversation to have, just so people are aware of these programs and how they can help and if how it can work for them. Firstly, welcome to the show, Ash.
Thanks, Jessica. Appreciate that.
Well, Ash, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and how you ended up founding Access Fertility and a bit about your background and how you got into this space.
So I was working in healthcare for a pharmaceutical company, and one of the areas we were focused on supporting was fertility.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, I recognized that there was a high level of unfairness when accessing treatment. It's a very emotionally charged area as it is, but when you find out that your local health provider, your NHS hospital won't allow you to get the treatment you need in order to have the success you hope for,
Yeah.
that can be quite galling. And I recognize that unfairness, and I wanted to do something that would help people get through that period of time, have a plan in place to access the treatment they need. And having been through IVF myself, I recognize that this is a very difficult time financially, emotionally, your relationship, the frustrations that you might have when you're not able to get the treatment you need.
Mm.
Uh, that's the reason for the founding of the company. I thought, well, what would it be like if we could create something that made it easier to access treatment and took away the financial risk? And that's what we've done by creating programs that give people lower cost access to care and a full refund if they don't have a baby during the course of treatment.
Oh, amazing. I mean, that's definitely a really important reason. I guess all the uncertainty with regards to costs and just emotions as well is so important. And how would you kind of explain how it works, like in brief, just for someone who may have never heard of this kind of program before?
So when you go to a clinic, I guess the easiest way to talk about it is by comparing it to what you would have if you didn't use Access Fertility or
Okay.
for your treatment. So if you were to go to a clinic that didn't work with us, or you went to a clinic that did work with us and you chose an option that didn't involve access fertility, which is obviously fine. You need to do what you want, what's right for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You would pay for the full treatment cycle up front, and you would then have the treatment. And if it didn't work out, you would have spent thousands of pounds, typically between £6,000 and £10,000 for a single attempt, what we call a cycle. And at the end of that cycle, that money has been paid to the clinic. They deserve the fee because it's a high cost, high skill service that they provide to patients, and they've done their best. And unfortunately, the patient in this situation hasn't had a child. That patient then needs to start to think about, with their partner or on their own, what do we do next? How do we get the finances in place for this? Do we really want to do it again? So that's the normal course of things, or has
Yeah.
been. We came on the scene around 10, 11 years ago. And what we say to patients is, look, the success rates for the country on the HFEA website, which is the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority. It's the governing body, if you like, for fertility treatment in the whole of the UK. And if you look at
Mm-hmm.
their average success rates across all treatment cycles for patients using IVF, let's say as an example, they show that you're about 1 in 4. You've got about a 1 in 4 chance of success for every go of IVF you have. And that does vary by age. Some younger patients will have a much higher success rate and some older will have a much lower. But overall, it lands around a 1 in 4, about a quarter.
Yeah.
And what we say to patients is, with that in mind, you know that you're going to need multiple treatment cycles, or you are likely to need multiple treatment cycles. Why not have a program in place that gives you that treatment? It covers you for all eventualities during the course of that treatment. You don't need to worry about what comes next. You already know, and the clinic already knows. So there's nobody at the clinic trying to discuss with you whether or not it's right to go forward. I mean, they'll have those conversations anyway, but you already know what's coming. And at the end of all that, unlike the example one, pay as you go with the clinic, we will provide you with a refund of the money you've invested in those
Mm-hmm.
services. So the difference is, and the simple explanation is, you're looking at multiple treatment cycles at a lower cost, and if it doesn't work out during the course of that treatment, Access Fertility, we take on that risk, if you like. I don't like to use that word, but that's what it is really. We take on
Mm-hmm.
that risk, and if it doesn't work out, we'll give you your money back.
Amazing. I mean, yeah, that's so good for providing, I think, a much higher level of security than basically putting all your money in one place and then seeing if it works or not. Are there any kind of limitations to that, like what you cover within that at all?
So it does vary clinic by clinic. So
Okay.
the main driver of that, well, let me start again. Sorry. The first thing to say is that we don't include medication. And the reason that we don't include medication is there's such a wide range of different needs within medication that the cost can range from £500 all the way up to £2,000 to £2,500.
Mm.
And including those in a program doesn't feel fair. So it doesn't feel fair to create a price point which is asking people to cover £2,500 if they only need £500. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't include that for that very reason.
Yeah.
Uh, and patients can discuss with their clinic how to deal with the medication costs, and they'll get an idea of that up front. They'll give them an approximate cost, which is usually it is approximate, but it's usually pretty accurate. But what we do include is everything from start to finish within the IVF treatment cycle. There may be some minor variations. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but those variations are typically dependent upon what the clinical thinking at the clinic is. So what the scientific viewpoint of the clinic is. So let me give you an example. There is a substance called embryo glue, which is used to encourage the embryo to attach to the endometrium. And some clinics think that has great value. Some clinics think that has a middling value, and some clinics that think that has no value.
Mm-hmm.
So for things like that, the best place to go is to go on the HFEA website. So the HFEA is the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority. Go on
Yeah.
their website, have a traffic light scheme for all different types of services, and you can see whether or not there are is any evidence. So you don't even need to go into it, because if it's red, you know there's no evidence for it, and you can make a decision around that. If it's amber, you can maybe say, well, I'm not sure, and I'll do some more reading around it. And if it's green, it means there's clear evidence that this is
Yeah.
a positive thing. So we're covering the patient for everything but medication, pretty much. And there are some variations from clinic to clinic, but these tend to be minor things where the evidence is varied and depending on the philosophy and the belief of the doctors at the
Mm-hmm.
clinic. That felt like a very long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, that's really clear. Thank you so much. And yeah, no, that's a very clear explanation. So thank you for doing that. And so as you're not I understand you're not a clinic yourself, and so you partner with these different clinics. How do you kind of like, is this readily available across the UK? How do you kind of choose your partner clinics? Is this something that, yeah, people across the UK can access, or is it more focused in particular areas?
I think that's a really good question, because choosing a clinic is one of the biggest challenges a patient has in front of them when
Mm,
they're starting on the journey of fertility treatment, whether it be IVF, IUI, or anything else uh, in that area. So what we make sure we do is only work with good clinics across the country. We work with between 40 and 50 clinics all over the UK and Ireland. We also work with clinics in Spain as well. Um, for us, the key thing is that the clinic has good success rates, so that the patient knows that they're going to be given the best opportunity to conceive and to have a baby, that
yeah.
they have good, I don't like to use customer care in the medical word, but I think that's something that people understand. Good customer service, empathy, sympathy, people
Yeah.
that care within the clinic will deal with you in the right way, will make sure you're looked after, will be responsive, will be engaged with you all the way through. Those things are important to us. And we visit every clinic we work with on a regular basis. We're not checking up on them, but we can see
Hmm.
if there are issues, and we can see all the time that these things are true. And and then there's also this element of convenience as well. How far are you away? So I would say that how convenient is it for you to get to? Most patients who are going through IVF, as an example, will need to visit the clinic somewhere between 5 and 10 times. So the clinic needs to be somewhere that's accessible for them, particularly if they're patients working in the middle of the day. They might need to nip out of work. It might not be something that you want to share with your employer for obvious reasons. It's extremely personal. So it needs to be somewhere that you can get to. So for us, ensuring that we work with clinics all over the country, incredibly important to make sure that patients can access what we do. And then the second things and the third thing are clinical success rates, and also the way that the patient is treated during their experience at the clinic. And I would say to patients again, HFEA, Human Fertility and Embryology Authority, great resource. You can go on there. You can have a look for yourself. Individual clinics, put in your age group, the type of treatment you want. It will give you the success rate for that clinic, and it will give you the average success rate across the country, so you can see how that compares. You can also see how many people in your age group the clinic treats, and you get an idea of whether or not this is the right place for you. And one more point on this, if I may, because I appreciate I'm kind of going on here, but
No, not at all.
you got to try before you buy. Suck it and see, in my opinion. If you've got the time to do so before making a commitment to a clinic, give them a call, ask them when their open evenings are, go and visit the open evenings. Make sure you feel connected to that clinic, that it feels comfortable for you, that the journey there is all right, you can handle that, it
Yeah.
works out well for you. And if there's a partner involved, that it works for them too, because they'll need to visit with you as well, or they may want to just visit with you, or you may want them to be there for you. Make sure you like the doctors, you like the team, because you are a team with the clinic working together to try and get this incredibly important outcome. So before committing thousands and thousands of pounds or spending who knows how much on a consultation,
Yeah.
depending on where you're in the country, it's going to be somewhere between 180 and 300 pounds. Make sure you've gone and had an opportunity to meet the people, see the place, and see whether or not you feel comfortable.
Mm. No, I think that's really important and something that, yeah, maybe not everyone always considers. So I think it's also quite reassuring that you yourselves as Access Fertility go to these clinics to make sure that you're not partnering with any ones that maybe are not of high enough standards. So it's quite nice, I think, yeah, reassuring for people that go through your program, that at least it kind of gives you a starting place to have a look at the ones that perhaps you're partnered with.
Yeah, and that's for us, that's critically important. I mean,
Yeah.
for me having a high, this is a lot on the line here, and you don't want anything to go wrong,
Mm.
and you have to feel reassured that patients are being cared for.
Yeah.
So definitely encourage patients to do that. And also, if there's for patients who are using our programs, we take feedback from them all the time, positive and negative, if there are any negative comments, and we feedback that back to the clinic. We don't sit
Mm.
idly by and say, well, we'll ignore that. We speak to the clinic and say, oh, this patient felt this could have been better. And the clinics are really good, I would say, in the UK. They take these things on board. When we talk about clinics that aren't as good, there's a very small margins. Most clinics are pretty good. Success rates do vary, but most clinics are pretty good overall, I'd say, in the UK.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. And I understand you also have different programs as well, depending on different criteria, for example, or different, yeah, there's different options that people can choose with regards to the program that they go on to. Could you briefly whiz us through, or yeah, whiz us through what you think or what the differences are?
Okay, so when I started this company, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't creating something that only helped out a few people. It had to be
Yeah.
something that was helping the most people possible. And that might sound a bit cheesy or insincere, but I assure you that is 100% what I wanted to do. And I hope it is what we are doing right now. So we do have some eligibility criteria for our refund programs, which I'll come on to in a second. But ignoring the eligibility for a moment, we have our multi-cycle programs, which offer patients multiple treatment cycles. They can withdraw at any time. By the way, that is true of all of our programs. Patients can have part of their treatment and decide that they no longer want to continue for whatever reason. There's no such thing, in my opinion, and in business's opinion, as a valid reason or an invalid reason. You've got so much going on in your life, you don't want to continue. That all you need to do is give us a call. We'll send you a form, and then there's no penalization financially either. We'll return to you any money that's outstanding or refund
Mm.
you if that's appropriate, and then you can carry on. So those multi-cycle treatments are available to everybody without criteria, and they offer the patient multiple treatment cycles at a price which is discounted versus the clinic. So that's the obvious benefit to that one. But the really, really exciting one, I suppose, is this idea of a refund if you don't have a baby. So getting your money back is never going to make up for the fact that you don't have the child you've been longing
Yeah.
for, but it can ease some of the stresses that go with paying for such a high cost treatment,
Hmm.
um, such as IVF. So we say to patients, you can choose either a 50%, 70%, or 100% refund. There are some eligibility criteria for that. But the good news is we are able to accept or make eligible 90% of patients.
Oh,
And it
great.
So we're not cherry picking patients. If you look at our numbers on our website, we've helped over 10,000 babies be born. I'm not taking it away from the patient or the clinic. They do the real work, but we've supported in that. And over £16 million has been returned to patients who unfortunately have been unsuccessful. So these programs are for the majority of people. And within that 10% of people who unfortunately are not eligible for the program, we have to have that because the clinic may not be comfortable treating that patient for multiple
Yeah.
treatment cycles. It may not be right for them. There may be complications. The clinic may say, we need to review this after every treatment cycle with this patient because of their particular needs. So that's important to us as well, that we're not just bringing people in, asking them to sign up to a program of care when it's not in their best interest. So the
Mm.
eligibility is more about making sure it's the right thing for the patient
Hmm.
rather than anything else. And on top of that, we also offer an unlimited treatment program, which is over the course of 2 years. So every other program I mentioned, the refund program or the multi-cycle program, they have no time limits on them. Patients take their time, do what they need to do, have a break, come back to it if they want, or as I mentioned, they can even withdraw if that's the right thing for them. But with the unlimited program, we say in a 2 year period, you can simply have as much treatment as you want, provided it's still recommended by the clinic and that you're not putting yourself in harm's way and you're doing things sensibly and as they should be done. And that's all spelled out very clearly, and it's absolutely fair as you'd expect.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, if there's no child, no baby, there will also be a refund. So unlimited treatment for 2 years with a refund at the end of it. Those are the three core areas we focus on, trying to help as many people as we can.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, as you mentioned, there's so many different options that people can jump into this as with different levels of commitment and different levels of kind of reassurance or different kind of options. So I think it's great that it's not just you haven't just created a one size fits all um, program. I like that there's a lot of different ones and people can kind of, yeah, jump in to whatever level that they kind of want to get to, which I think is really great. And just, yeah, to run through, could you run through the eligibility criteria just for people listening that perhaps may be unsure whether they're going to fit onto that or not?
Yeah, so we're looking at it. We're talking about here patients using their own eggs. We do offer refund programs for patients using donor eggs, and on those programs, there are the eligibility criteria is extremely minimal. It's mostly around age, and that's matching it to the clinic. So the clinic has their own view on what the upper end of that age bracket should be. But typically, I mean, most clinics we work with are happy to help somebody right into their mid to late 40s
Yeah.
using donor eggs. So we'll kind of put that to one side because that's a lot more straightforward. With our refund programs, we're mostly looking at things like age. So it is true that if somebody is over the age of 40, we don't offer a refund program. And that's just because you can't make that work. So there has to be a balance for the patient and for us as well to make it. The cost would just be so much that
Mm.
the program wouldn't make sense to the patient. You'd be charging a ridiculous amount of money, and I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. It has to be a price point which is attractive and helpful rather
Yeah.
than prohibitive and inaccessible. So, the
Mm.
clue to the name for us, we're called Access Fertility. We want to make these programs accessible to people. So
Yeah.
we have to draw the line somewhere, and if we can ever increase that, we will. So we look at age, we look at a thing called AMH, which is anti-Mullerian hormone, which is a predictor of ovarian reserve. We look at a thing called AFC, which is antral follicle count. So looking at what follicles the patient has in their ovaries, what potential there is in there to create eggs, which can then go on hopefully to create embryos, whether or not there's any other concomitant conditions such as endometriosis, PCOS, things like that. And I might add that we do have patients with PCOS and endometriosis. It's just a question of whether or not it's to a point where the doctor is recommending a more cautious approach to treatment.
Yeah.
We also look at if there's a male partner involved, we look at the sperm quality and whether or not there's been any previous children born on previous treatment cycles with an IVF clinic and how that went about. So those
Mhm.
are, we look at everything in the round. We're humans making a decision. It's not a computer. It's not an algorithm. We have a medical team here. We have a team of 45 people at Access Fertility, and
Mhm.
part of that team is a medical team headed up by Professor Scott Nelson. And we have a team of nurses that work with him as well. They make assessments on every single patient coming through in the round as to whether or not they should be eligible for these programs. And as I say, 90% of people will be eligible. The main criteria being the age, I would have said.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're trying our best to help as many people as possible, and we've kept the eligibility criteria as loose as we can, without there being any jeopardy to the clinic or to the patient. It's important that patient safety is prioritized in all of this.
No, of course. And I think, yeah, you phrased it really nicely. And just the case of whether it's right for the patient themselves as well, I think is super important. So I like, yeah, that framing of it, I think is really important as well. So yeah, it's important just to run through the eligibility, I feel, and kind of bringing it back to a more like wider view. You obviously started this 10, 11 years ago. And I guess I'd just love to know what differences do you see in the fertility market now, and where do you kind of see it going with fertility market in general and how Access Fertility fits into that?
Yeah, I think it's been a difficult 15 years, let's say, for
Mm.
IVF, maybe even more. We have people having children at a later age, and when people have children at a later age or start to attempt to conceive at a later age, they're more likely to find challenges with the issues that they may not have. So about 1 in 6 people will encounter fertility issues. They're much
Mhm.
easier to deal with when you're younger, most of them, than they are when you're older. Your opportunity to conceive just diminish as you go beyond 35, particularly after 37. There is a steep drop in your fertility potential. So that's something that we're seeing in the recent Human Fertilization Embryology and Authority report. An Embryology Authority report. Which was published and it's on their website at the moment. You can see that the average age of people going through IVF is continuing to go up as well.
Yeah.
So we don't see that trend reversing anytime soon. People are prioritizing their careers, delaying starting families. They're sometimes being single for longer. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course. And they're making choices in their lives that don't involve having children. And one of the things, and I will talk more broadly about the kind of politics around this as well, and whether or not we see any changes there. But I think people are waiting longer and not really anticipating that there will be any challenges for them personally, because
Mm.
in actual fact, 1 in 6 is not most people, but it's still a big number of people. And I would encourage people to, particularly if you're in your mid-20s or something like that, or late 20s, and you think at some point in the future you may want to have a family, but you're not considering it right now, whether you're male or female, whether you're single or in a same-sex relationship or a heterosexual relationship, whatever it might be, go and pay a few £100 if you can manage to do that, to check whether or not there are any underlying issues that affect your opportunity to conceive in the future. That might seem like a lot of money for something that you might not need. And I appreciate that £300 or £300 or £400, depending on what services you require and where you are in the country, is a kind of an excessive cost for a lot of people when they don't think they're going to be having a baby for now. But it really, really will help. And if you can encounter those issues earlier on and deal with them earlier on, you've got a much better chance. So that's the kind of aging thing, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So go and get a fertility MOT if you can. If you don't want to, don't do it, obviously. But you need to understand that it might make things a bit more challenging for you in the future. And NHS provision is just simply getting worse. I mean, the NHS is, without getting into the political stripes of it, whether you're left or you're right, I think most people accept that it's a bit of a mess at the moment. And fertility, unfortunately, is one of those services that doesn't get prioritized. I mean, we work with Fertility Network UK, which is a charity which tries to support patients going through treatment, whether it's private or NHS. And they also have a lobbying arm called Fertility Fairness that's lobbying government to improve to improve the amount of treatment available and to
Mm.
adopt the NICE guidelines. The NICE guidelines they've been around for over 10 years at least, and that most places don't adopt them. And they recommend 3 fresh cycles of IVF and 3 frozen cycles of IVF for every patient coming through. Within the age banding of 23 to 39, and unfortunately that's not been adopted. And we're very supportive of that. We think that the NHS should do that, but this current government has made no noise around supporting improved access and improved coverage of treatment, and the last government didn't either. And unfortunately, I don't see that changing in the near future. So I guess if you're then having to have private treatment because you can't get access to it through the NHS, then it does make sense for to use a company like ours, which feels incredibly salesy. And I'm sorry, but I would use
No.
I would use our service, because if I'm going to be paying, let's say, £12,000 for IVF,
Mm,
if I'm unfortunate and I don't have a baby at the end of that,
yeah,
then I'd like to have that money back, please. Whether it's for a kind of borrowing against my house, or whether I've taken a loan out my credit card, borrowed from
yeah.
my parents, or taken from my own savings, or whatever it might be. I'd like to know that there's an opportunity to get that back. And in England, 65% of all treatment is private. In the UK as a whole, it's 60%. And that number has been going up and up and up for the last 15 years. And I don't see that changing, unfortunately.
Yeah, wow. I think that's a kind of slightly bleak at the end overview, but I agree.
Sorry.
No, don't worry. I think it's important just to kind of be aware of the trends in the fertility market and just to see where it's going. And agreed. I think it can be very stressful, and particularly for people that are kind of trying to navigate this space and may or may not be eligible or be getting the NHS support that they deserve and would have in an ideal world. I think it's important for them to know about companies like yourself and other companies out there and charities that can give them the support that they need to ultimately receive the end goals that they're looking for. And I think that's where we can fill the space and just feel that knowledge, and just having the knowledge of that is super important, and then people can do with that what they choose to. I think that's what's so important.
And find, as I mentioned a little earlier, and it's not an original point by any stretch, but
Mm.
finding reliable, trustworthy information
Yeah.
and trustworthy partners is extremely challenging. So I've already mentioned the HFEA website 1,000 times, so I won't mention that again, but it is a good resource for patients.
Hmm.
There are also places to go online which are trustworthy and reputable, and one of them would be IVF Babel. So IVF Babel is an online network community for
Yeah.
patients, not just in the UK, across the world, to share their stories. There's case studies on there. There's directories of information. There's all sorts of resources on there that can help people out. There's also, you can speak, you can engage with somebody there as well. It's not a commercial platform.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage patients as well, if they're looking around and they want support, they want to find a connection with somebody, they want more information, they don't necessarily want to speak to the clinic, they want to find someone who's
Mm.
more like them rather than medical or whatever it might
Yeah.
be, or a company, then have a look on the IVF Battle website. There's loads of useful resources on there.
No, I think that's a really good recommendation, particularly as it can feel quite daunting and there's such a wealth of information out there, and not all of it, some of it can be misleading, and some of it you don't know if it's got an ulterior motive, for example. And also, I think, as you mentioned earlier as well, there can be a lot of stigma, and people want to keep this a confidential or private matter. So I think finding those places where you feel safe to speak about it and receive reliable information are super, super important as well.
Yeah, it's not, as you say, for whatever reason, that there is some stigma for some people. It's
Yeah.
not everybody. I mean, we recently had a case study we put out on our website, and I think published elsewhere as well, with Rosie and Paul, and they were very happy to talk about their experience. They spent £12,000. They chose a 50% refund option with us. They went through the treatment. It didn't work out. They got £6,000 back. They then invested that in a multi-cycle program, and then they had a baby.
Oh,
And they're
amazing.
really, really happy to talk about that. And if anyone's interested in looking at their case study, they can just Google Rosie and Paul Access
Hmm.
Fertility, and it'll come up. But that's unusual. That's very unusual. Most people don't want to talk about this in public.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's something that needs to change. It should be normalized. It is changing slowly but surely.
Hmm.
And finding other people that can embolden you to share that story in a safe space, it is critically important to help you get through it, I think.
No, I think that's amazing. And yeah, I think it's slowly changing as kind of more and more people realize that, as you said, it's 1 in 6 people. It's not a small amount of people that are going through these concerns. So that feeling of isolation hopefully can, as more and more people share their stories, I think hopefully people can start to realize that, yeah, they're not alone and there's a lot of people going through something similar.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, I think that kind of brings me to the end of my questions. And I just want to say, is there anything else that you wanted to mention or anything else that you wanted to say before we kind of wrap up today?
No, not nothing really, other than say thanks very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And if any of if yourself or any of your listeners have any questions that need clarifying, please let me know. I'm happy to do that
Mhm.
either in writing or in writing. That sounds very formal, doesn't it? Via email or via over the phone, whatever it might be. Very, very happy to clarify anything.
Yeah, amazing. I'll tag all of your guys' socials and where to find you below, so everyone can be directed to the appropriate places. But I just want to say a massive thank you for coming on. And I think, yeah, it's a really important conversation to have and definitely an option that I think people need to at least know about and know is an option because it can definitely be an empowering pathway for some people, or a lot of people actually. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Jessica. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.